everybody, welcome to this great session today on how to work flexibly in the new world of work. Working flexibly is a real art. It's a learning curve and it takes time to cultivate. The mindset, the behaviours and the discipline we all need as employers and staff to make it really work. And so I'm truly blessed today to have three leading experts on the subject. We have Catherine Murphy from PwC. Do you want to give us a wave? We have Simon Connelly, who's the Performance and Leadership Excellence Manager at Zurich Insurance. And we have Caroline Newton-Hardie, the founder of Peace and Riot.
Caroline Newte-Hardie.
Newte Hardie. Oh, I do apologise. I'm so sorry. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Juliet Turnbull. I'm the moderator of today's session, and I'm the founder of 2 to 3 Days, which is a supercharged highway for recruiters to attract and employ highly capable women. Anyway, we want to get straight into these questions. But first of all, before we do, can I ask you, my panelists, to quickly give a quick intro to our audience today? Catherine, would you like to go first?
And indeed, thanks, Juliet. So as Juliet said, I work at PricewaterhouseCoopers. I've had various roles there with them. I started 14 years ago, only expecting to do a quick qualification and leave after 3 years. That clearly didn't work because I love them so much. I am one of those lucky people that is able to say I love my job. The reason why I'm on here today is I currently have the privilege and the excitement of looking after the flexible talent network in PwC. So that looks after lots of different roles and lots of different ways that we can get people into PwC under that flexible banner. So that's why I'm talking to you.
Thank you. And Simon, may you introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, Simon Connelly. I work at Zurich Insurance within the people team, which is what we call HR. I look after leadership development and performance management. And I think at the moment we've been supporting our leaders and our employees through the COVID situation, really with some great success. And, you know, recognising this isn't going to change anytime quick. I think the subject today is a great subject to be talking about. So really great to be here.
Thank you. And Caroline, may you introduce yourself as well?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Caroline Newte-Hardie. I am founder of Peace and Riot. Peace and Riot is a third space where we are supporting freelance and flexible workers in an increasingly, what used to be called an emerging trend. And I think it is kind of what is going to happen in the future. My background is in education and I worked for Accenture for a number of years. And I'm looking forward to seeing that trend become reality.
Brilliant. Thank you, everybody. So let's kick off with our first question. And I'm going to leave this one with Simon, please. What are the most important things that leaders and managers need from employees when working flexibly? Whether someone is working remotely or different hours or patterns, what helps to make this successful from the perspective of a leader or a manager? Simon, could you kick off for us?
Yeah, sure. I think the first thing to say is I think this is quite new for a lot of leaders and managers. Traditionally, we've all worked in offices. Of course, there's been people that have worked at home or remotely, but for the majority of managers, this is quite new. So I think the first thing that's really needed is transparency. I think both ways. So it's going to be a two-way street. Trust, which will take some time to build, and honesty. So I think those three things: transparency, trust, and honesty. Now, when I say transparency and honesty, a couple of things really. First of all, about your ways of working. So how would you like to work? What works for you? What can the company provide or your employer provide to you? But also, how are you feeling? So the honesty and transparency around how you're feeling with that kind of distance between you, not, you know, that physical distance between you. I think it's really important. So the open dialogue, you know, continuous open dialogue is so important. I think a leader and a manager will really want to have confidence and comfort in knowing that you're focused on the right things, you're adding value, and essentially know what you're up to. And you will also need to know what's expected of you as well. So transparency, trust, and honesty. Caroline, anything to add?
Yeah, thank you. I would say one thing at the moment is that what's key in a lot of discussions is that we talk about flexible working, is that at the moment we talk about flexible working after a massive crash course in what people are understanding as flexible working, but isn't a true reflection of it, i.e. the pandemic and people working from home almost 100%. And I think that so getting over that fear. So as a employee, that feeling of, well, I'm only in this position now, it's only because of the pandemic. Well, actually, it's about looking at which bits are successful and which bits have worked really, really well for you, and feeding that back and working out and putting in a long-term plan once the pandemic is, fingers crossed, once the pandemic is over. And also it's working together, and that communication between both parties is really, really key, because it's not just this is what's going to happen and that's that on either side. It's what works for everybody and how that can best support the team, because actually flexible working can so often support a team better than I think we've realised. We sort of see it too much in what it's not, and rather than too much of what it can be. And it's about, for employees, you need to be able to couch what you see you're going to add by going for a flexible working option, as opposed to something that you're asking to take because you're attending.
Yeah. And Kat, PwC have been adopting a flexible working style for a while now. What have you seen as the biggest benefits that leaders and managers have fed back to you as a result of managing a flexible workforce?
So I think it's twofold. I think the benefits for managers and for a leadership team, we were fortunate in that we'd already started an approach to flexible working. So we have what's called as the everyday flexibility approach. So that means that everybody at PwC can work flexible hours. They can work from home. You don't necessarily have to have a formal agreement to do that. And that has helped in that it's just sort of, it's challenged that status quo of you have to be seen to be working. So it has encouraged people to really trust what their employees are doing. And I've always challenged managers back, because whenever you get the challenge of, well, I need somebody that works in front of me, I need somebody that sits in front of my office. Really, what do you think they are doing? You can't watch them literally all 7.5 hours a day. They could be on YouTube, they could be just like surfing the internet. So what is the difference from somebody doing that in front of your office to doing it at home? And I think what COVID has done is forced us to understand that it actually can be done. And shock horror, people can enjoy their job a lot more when they're given that freedom and their trust. And what's more important is so many more people are more productive, and that is what has come out and been really encouraged by leadership, that we have been more productive by working from home. So I think there's one fold that is sort of flagged up to the leadership of actually they're really pleased with the way that people have worked. And I do think it helps that we already had that kind of established previously. But the other flip side is that leadership were very honest from the very beginning in March that they would cover it and they would cover us and they would take that responsibility. And it was obviously very important to be linked in with clients, but it was most important to look after ourselves, because people were so worried at the beginning of this when it was March and we thought it was only going to last for 3 weeks. Who would have thought that? Now we're sitting here months on end. But that was key as well. There was a lot more done for employees from their personal perspective.
Okay. And Simon,
apologies for that noise, I am having work done in the loft. So just to add to the whole environment of working from home at the moment.
Do you want to put yourself on mute whilst I ask Simon a question? So Simon, can you give some examples of what Zurich have done to encourage transparency and honesty within the working practices at Zurich?
Yeah, sure. Much the same as Kat just mentioned there. We've had flexible working for quite a few years now. It's been adopted differently across the organisation, clearly dependent on role, responsibility. But we have had, our offices created to create more collaboration space and kind of afford that flexible working approach. As far as building transparency and trust, we have radicalized our performance management approach to do away with the traditional mid-year reviews and replace them with continuous conversations. So the idea there is that you speak with your manager regularly, you have touch points with them about progress and how you're feeling, and just trying to build a story up as you go through the year, rather than it being just 3 distinct conversations. We also have a really easy to use feedback tool, and lots of recognition tools as well to kind of try and build up the impact people are having and recognising that as well. So, and it provides people the opportunity to share feedback on particular initiatives, projects, or behaviours throughout the year. So
brilliant.
Just a few examples there.
Okay, thank you. We move on to the next question. And I'm going to start this off with you, Kat, if I may. In your view, what are the skills and attributes you'd say are essential for individuals to develop to be able to effectively work flexibly in this new emerging world of work?
I don't know if you can actually hear me, so if we need to go to somebody else, we can. Excellent. Okay. So first of all, I would always flip it on its head, and I kind of say you need exactly the same skills as you do if you're going for a permanent role. Why is it any different if you are going to have that role flexibly? So that would be the first thing that I would say. But I would say it's also not being shy that you are working flexibly. So having that key communication streamline open and making sure that you're very honest. I think especially if you're going through the interview process, individuals want to give off as much and want to promise more so that they can say that I can do this, I'll be able to do X, Y, and Z. And you have to be very realistic at what you can do and what you can't do. So not necessarily seeing yourself as something different, not necessarily seeing yourself as I've got to do more because I want to work flexibly. It's just being very honest with your employer and yourself, which I think is quite hard as well in the first instance, as to what it is.
All right, I'm lovely going to move away from the conversation so the drilling can carry on. Simon, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I would say, if you're going to be working flexibly, then flexibility is important. I think depending on your work patterns and your colleagues' work patterns, they might require some flexibility there in your approach. So, and certainly some adaptability as well. And I think certainly those people that I work with that work reduced hours or flexible hours, they have to show an awful lot of resilience as well. They're not always involved in conversations. They have to pick up and try and fill in some of the gaps themselves. But I think perspective is a really important thing as well. Just making sure that you're true to yourself and you're true to your ways of working and you keep that in perspective. So otherwise you can become quite overwhelmed if you feel like you're falling behind or you don't have all the information you need. And I think the last thing really is discipline. So I think discipline to recognize when it's work time and when it's not work time. And I think that's probably the most tricky thing to do, especially if people are working different working patterns, to really commit to your non-work time. And therefore you might need to put in some tripwires or some prompts for yourself to make sure you stay true to that. And the other thing I would say is that, technology has just evolved so much and continues to evolve. So, really stepping towards technology, embracing technology. There are all sorts of tools out there, collaboration tools. We're on the call today virtually using our cameras. And something that I always think is quite good as well is something called the method, which is what actors use. So if an actor is on stage, they really need to turn up the volume of their gesticulation and the tone of their voice and all those sorts of things. So I think that's a skill in itself, but I think really important in this remote working world. Something else to consider there. So yeah, as well as that, I think empathy and trust come back into the equation as well. I think they're things that you just need to have when you are working in this way. So yeah, that would be my view on the situation.
I'm seeing emerging, and what you've said and Kat's just said, is that we're merging into it's a two-way process now. Before, you used to just go and do your job and do it as the employer wanted to. As an employee, you're getting a greater say in how you can make this work, and then for that allows for you've got to be bold and own your authenticity and own your life and bring your life to work by saying, I need to finish work at 3 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon but don't worry, I've already got X, Y, and Z project covered and you'll still have it by Friday morning at the agreed deadline. And so you've got to own it as much as the company. Your boss at the end of the day is a human being as well, and they've got targets and they've got responsibilities. So I think that's what I'm seeing emerging. It's this two-way street of communication and not just expecting it one way. Is there anything, Caroline, that you would add to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's complete. So for us, I mean, in the newsroom, we talk about flexible working, it's often focused on white collar working and what would be considered something office workers, essentially, in some way or other. So for Peace and Riot, we have kitchen staff, and we have serving staff, and eventually post-pandemic we'll have childcare staff. And those are all require, it's not presenteeism, you literally have to be there, otherwise you know, it's not going to cook. So for us, it's about making sure that as a team we are able to support each other in being able to work flexibly around each other's demands, just if you see what I mean. So it's like being able to prioritize as a team as a whole, not just that one individual to another as employer employee. It's the whole team, and it's a healthier way to work, I think, overall anyway, because you don't end up with the, well, these are the condensed hours people, these are the flexible hours people. This is just the team and how we work together.
Catherine or Simon, can either one of you give an example of how companies have, either Zurich or PwC have actually given a permission or structure to set up to encourage their staff to step forward, to be their authentic selves? How have you done that, either in the review process or at hiring? Because I still think it has to be led by the companies first in order to give the staff the permission to do it. Simon, could you come back to me on that?
Yeah, of course. So last year, maybe the year before, we introduced all of our vacancies as part-time, job share or full-time, which I think quite a few organisations are doing now. But that's obviously attracted different people to open roles. And also, I think, you know, within the performance conversations and the ongoing conversations, I think it's about being honest. And we see people changing their work patterns all the time. So recognizing, you know, that their whole life requires a different working pattern. And as an organization, we've been very open and honest with that, and catered where we can to people who would like to alter up their working patterns. But I think the vacancy point I mentioned a minute ago has really changed the dynamic of our applicants into the organization. And I think we just need to stay true to that as we see these people joining our organisation, and make sure we are remembering, you know, why we attracted them in the first place, and remembering to be true to ourselves as an organisation, that we provide them with the support that they signed up to.
Yeah, and
yeah, I would just totally agree. And I think as well, just to add to that, the other couple of things that PwC have done is it's been led by the leaders. So they have been the ones, first of all, to kind of be coming out and saying that they've had to flex their work around, say, for example, schools, or from having to pick up children, or from looking after carers, and all of the responsibilities that everybody had, but becomes even worse at the moment during COVID, to the point that one of the initiatives that they rolled out was, so obviously as a professional services firm, we all have to account for every 6 minutes of our time and complete a timesheet. And at the beginning of COVID, that just wasn't practical, because people were having to look after children. They were sharing duties that they simply didn't have to do before. So what was rolled out was a code that any carer or parent or anybody impacted by COVID could use. And that was a real honest way of saying, look, everybody's contracted to do 7 hours or 7.5 hours. But if you simply cannot do your work because you have a screaming child, do not worry. And I personally felt so comforted by that it was really led by the leadership team. Yeah. It was really comforting to know that they had our back, basically.
Yeah.
So that's just one example.
And Simon, Zurich, how do they demonstrate that they've really got the staff's back?
Yeah, I think we completely focus on outcomes and impact that somebody has, not about the amount of effort they put in. Of course, that's important, but I think we're consistent in that approach. Couple that with behaviours, and I think it gives us a really good reflection. It gives everybody a fair chance to deliver in their role, and it gives us a really good opportunity to reward performance in the right way. So outcomes and impact are really important.
And is one of the way that you manage the outcomes is going back to that rather than having the sort of twice yearly performance reviews, that you're having regular continual dialogues with your line managers to chart progress.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think we're no different from most organisations. We have performance goals set at the beginning of the year collaboratively between a leader and their team. and then they're reviewed throughout the year. And this year, probably more than any other year, we've seen them flex and change and revise, and new ones come in because priorities have changed. So yes, it's that regular conversation that really keeps that on track.
Brilliant. Okay, going on to our next question. Many people who work flexibly really grapple with guilt about their chosen or their way of working. How can we kick guilt into the long grass, guys, so that we all have this really developed and strong, confident mindset that we can own our job and own our lives, and that both are not mutually exclusive. Simon, can I kick off with you on the meaty subject of guilt?
Yeah, I think it's a really difficult one, because I think naturally we all traditionally see work, it's been programmed in our minds that work is where we work, not what we do. So I think working more flexibly, and certainly in these times where we're all pretty much working at home, it's about being honest and realistic with yourself. So recognizing what's possible. I think you mentioned earlier, Juliet, about being authentic, being your authentic self. I think that's so important. But I think contracting and agreeing with your manager around what's possible, what you're going to be focusing on, your current your ways of working, things like that are really, really important. As I mentioned a moment ago, having the clear outcomes with the regular reviews, and maybe feedback from other people as well to give a more balanced view of your performance and how you're getting along. And just to reiterate this concept of tripwires, really around making sure that you're catching yourself out when you are not being true to yourself. Because I think you can lean one way or the other. You could pinch time from when you're not meant to be working, and you can pinch time from when you're meant to be working. And it's about just recognizing that's a little bit give and take, but you're staying true to the principles of what you set yourself up for. So yes, that would be my take on this particular situation.
Yeah, I think also the one thing that we all share, whether you're the CEO or a junior member of staff, we only have 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We all share the same amount of time. And I think it's about us all individually taking responsibility of our ownership of our time. I was having a conversation with one of my weekly catch-ups with one of my team members today. And there's some work, I don't mind if she does it at midnight on a Saturday night or 6 o'clock in the morning on a Thursday. And that's completely her shtick if she then wants to go and play with her children in the afternoon. And then there's other times when there is work that needs a collaborative effort, or there are strict deadlines that involve other people, and you need to be mindful of your impact in that role. So to me, I think we've got to be bold and we've got to own our authentic selves. And if we're sitting in that meeting and thinking, that's going to kill me or really impact me if I do what they want me to do, I've got to speak up and own it and say, I can't do it then, but also offer a solution. And I think that feeling of guilt will then disappear. What would you have to say on that, Caroline?
Well, I mean, Peace and Riot, the idea of Peace and Riot entirely came from this area of guilt in finding a way to work within work where you're not terrified of absenteeism, pressured into presenteeism. So Peace and Riot is specifically aimed at parents, where we're recognizing that parents particularly have a kind of 3-4 part day, kind of drop the kids, go to school, drop the kids at school, go to work, pick them up, deal with some kind of management there, whether it's you picking them up or somebody else is picking them up, and then you get home, bedtime, and then you start work again. And that's quite an overloaded day. And that's because everybody's trying to be the best they can be 100% of the time in each role. But each role as a full-time role is very difficult to do. So with Peace and Riot, we're trying to support people so particularly that last shift of the day, that after hours shift where you pick up the kids at school and you've got them, you are able to go to somewhere that is going to this idea about the third space. And I really hope that this followed through across the board, really, where parents or anybody with any kind of caring responsibility can go to and be supported in their working life. So it's a commercial offer, but there are more and more methods of support. And also it's about finding community, because you are right, it's right that now we are more separate, and we may find that there are jobs being advertised for companies, in Britain but based in Spain, and you won't ever have a community in that sense within your like a face-to-face community, but we're trying to offer that face-to-face community because I think that you need that sort of support. Well, this is your life, it's okay, you're doing your work, and you need that support. So I think letting go of the guilt is talking about the guilt, to be honest. And finding people in similar situations, and getting advice from them. But also there's this sort of strange thing about being married. You're only really good at your job if you're married to the job. Well, I'd argue it's a pretty unhealthy marriage if you're not allowed to go and talk to anyone, do anything else, go anywhere. So I think that it's rethinking about what having a better understanding of what being a good employee.
But I think the kernel of this issue comes from the fact that we have this awful statement that came out in the 70s about work-life balance. Because if you stop and unpick that for a moment, it implies that work is separate from your life. Well, the last time I checked in, I only have one life, and work is part of my life. So to me, I've always been on my soapbox about work-life integration. And I think what we are craving is real role models that senior management don't just bang the drum about how much money they've made and how many clients they've won, but they really own the fact that they've got pickups to do from school, or I spoke to a lady the other day who is training to be a professional triathlete. So Kat, can you give us some examples of some empowering real role models that are really leading the charge to banish the guilt at PwC by owning their authentic lives?
Yeah, I think so. We have numerous senior managers, directors that have come in, partners even, that have come back in to work. And I think the guilt aspect is not new at the moment because of COVID. I think a lot of people have spoken about feeling guilty because you've got a commitment outside of work as well as work. And you are therefore, if you're at work, you feel guilty because you're not at your other commitment, whatever that is. If it's building your own job, if it's looking after your parents, if it's looking after a charity work that you do, if it's looking after kids. And similarly, when you're looking after this, you're then feeling guilty that you're not at work. So I don't think that's necessarily a new concept. And I think that's why it goes back to, if you are upfront from the very beginning as to what your agreement is going to be, then it makes it a lot easier, because you are then feeling that you have delivered on a promise. And I think if you have got from the very beginning your contract set out, so whether that be you specifically work part-time, or you have flexi hours, or you work an annualized days contract, for example, that are all different contracts that can be set up, that then gives you the initial comfort of, I'm still working that role. And it's then being very honest with yourself to have that communication and know that you are not going to get it right. And certainly so many of our leaders do talk about that concept of, when they started, they came back in and it was like, yes, I'm going to do everything, I'm going to be brilliant, I can tick off everything. And it's life does not let you do that. And it's from very small things of just getting the normal flu. I don't know if that's probably a really dirty word at the moment, but just the regular flu. Things happen in life. So it's therefore being clear on what your non-negotiables are and making very sure that you can't then let that guilt come back in, and being quite strict, especially at the moment where we are all working from home and we all can continue to work, that we're not going to let that happen. And what are we going to do to cut that off, kind of thing.
And guys, we could carry on for about another half an hour, but we're not going to be allowed to, and I'll have my hands slapped for not moderating this session. So we've got a few minutes left, and I've still got another burning question to ask you all. So 2020 has gifted the working world with a wealth of evidence to support the businesses and the social case for flexible working. Yet sadly, there's still some die-hard dinosaurs and skeptics out there that can't wait to get their team back into the office full-time, 9 to 5, and to banish the thought of remote working. So how do we not go backwards but go forward so that we empower more people to work? Simon, I'm going to kick off with you, and if you could give me your top tips for leadership around the world to ensure that we go forwards, not backwards, what would you have to say?
Yeah, I think it's embracing the situation. I think it's, as I mentioned earlier, recognizing work is what you do, not where you work. There are benefits of being in the office that need to be recognized, or together certainly. Collaboration and kind of maybe the odd team get together to build engagement. But it's about demonstrating that the impact you can have working remotely or differently changes not an iota when you're working in that different way. So to some degree, it's a bit of a journey that I think we'll need to take some of these people on to recognise it. And we've heard a little bit of it since COVID from some of our staunch leaders kind of go, actually, do you know what? It's changed my mind. I didn't realise it could operate in this way. So we are starting to see those green shoots of some of those people. But yeah, it's
Kat, what would you have to add? You've lost.
Oh, hello. Can you hear me? Yes. Yep. It's really interesting because I've been looking after the Flexible Talent Network for a couple of years now, and the biggest part of my job is talking to the business and getting them comfortable that they can employ people through the FTN, through the flexible work strategies. The way that I tackle them is that every conversation is different. So knowing what their trigger points are for everybody that you're talking to, and understanding what they want from their employees. So if they've got busy periods that they can use people cyclically, obviously then flexible working can massively help that. But the key things that I would always try and push to those people are, ultimately, if you do not get on board with flexible working, you will become the next blockbusters, because this is now how our market out there is demanding to work, especially because of COVID. We are not going to go back to normal because normal has changed. So if you don't get on the bus, you know what's going to happen. And I think that is quite important. And a lot of people are seeing that now, that they are ultimately missing out on such good top talent by not going into that flexible working. We're not there yet. It's small steps, and I'm not professing that we are, but I think if we just keep chipping away at it with so many people, we will get there.
Okay, and guys, thank you so much. We've had an amazing session. And to wrap up, I'm going to put you on the spot now and ask you to share. We've got hundreds and hundreds of candidates listening to this session. What would be your one top tip that you would say above anything else, wearing your personal hat, wearing your business hat, that you would say to these amazing candidates that come to the Flexpo conference today to empower them to find their ideal flexible role? Simon, can I kick off with you?
Yeah, I'd encourage you to think about your whole life and work being a part of that, and an enabler to have a full and rich life, and not an inconvenience to your life. So really think about how it's going to intertwine with your aspirations for your whole life.
Brilliant. And Caroline?
I'd say, in terms of looking at roles that that might suit you, is looking at not just your work experience, but your life experience and what you can bring, because that shouldn't be diminished. It's often incredibly valuable.
Yeah.
And I think leading on from it, like looking at your skills, but also remembering when you are applying to an employer, they're picking you as well, and not necessarily just the other way around. And we always go into interviews thinking, oh gosh, it's me that they've got to pick, but ultimately you are picking them as well. So really feel empowered by that, and know what you're good at, know your skills, and have that confidence when you're going into the role, and know what you can do around the flexible working, and it's not something to hide away from and to shy behind.
Okay, and I would end this by, to empower yourself is to be your authentic self, own who you are, and the world's your oyster. So thank you very much to Simon, Caroline and Kat for a really engaging conversation, and we look forward to having further discussions at the conference. Take care.